Contact with students. It's really the high point of professional work, I think. I remember students from every year that I've been here. I'm still in touch with some students who are now, oh my heavens, I guess they're in their 40s now. Students in all walks of life, people who've gone into business or into the professions. It's always been very rewarding to me to think that I had something to do with what's brought them to where they are in life. Language teaching brings out the theatrical, probably because of the medium, because of the nature of language, and getting students to express themselves verbally outside of their native idiom. So it takes a degree of theater, to keep a good language class going. It's come to be expected of a language teacher now. I think much more so than in just about any other area except theater that I can imagine. I don't think that the natural scientists never say, "Oh, I have to yuck it up in my lectures or something." I haven't heard them say that at any rate. I don't. But in languages, it's kind of expected. It's language class be dynamic and have a pace to it and have a certain amount of variation and interest and dynamism. My book is a study of the fiction of Guy de Maupassant. Who is a late 19th century writer of primarily short stories, although he did also write 6 novels and left a 7th novel unfinished at the time when he stopped writing. 300 and some short stories. It's over 300 short stories. It's quite a large corpus of fiction. And what the book is a study of Maupassant's fiction under the lens of evolutionary theory, how a knowledge of Darwin would enlighten a reading of Guy de Maupassant. It's predicated on the view that literature can be read and better understood in light of Darwinian theory, and that hasn't been done much yet in literary study. As I began researching this about 5 years ago, I thought that it was entirely new. As I started looking around, it seems to be only in this country. It seems to be in the United States, where it is the only place I've seen it. I have seen titles in German as well, it's true, I have to say. But primarily in this country, where a few isolated people have gotten the idea that of course, Darwin is the linchpin of biology. Everyone knows that biological theory is founded now on Darwinian thought. It's been extended now to other areas. It's been extended to anthropology, by virtue of that, I guess, as an outgrowth of that, into sociology as well. In psychology, there's a growing school of evolutionary psychology, for example. So I thought, how about an evolutionary approach to literature, to fictional literature? It doesn't. I wouldn't say it flies in the face of literary theory that has been popular, and I'm talking about what's called post-structuralism or deconstruction. Postmodernism, I guess, is the term that's used most often. That's been in vogue now since the 1960s or 70s. I wouldn't say it flies in the face, but I would expect a degree of resistance from practitioners of postmodern theory. The reasons for it are kind of complex, but postmodernism, in a word, refuses the kind of certainty, the kind of objectiveness that a scientific, empirical perspective requires. And was reading, and literally for 20 years, I would just read these collections of essays and just kept reading and reading. I found it fascinating. It's a fascinating topic. Got the bright idea one day I was thinking if I could join that to literary study somehow. It's just the two areas are the two that are of most interest to me. So I thought, well, how could I bring Darwin to bear on literature? And it occurred to me I could go one of two ways. It could either I could either take the more difficult way would be to write a philosophy of literature, not so much a study of a particular author or a particular text, but a philosophy of an ontology of literature. What is literature? You know? But do that from a Darwinian perspective, and that would be what evolutionary psychology has tried to do with the human mind. See, the mind is a product of evolution. It's a strategy that the species has come up with to enhance survival. The mind, it helps humanity survive. Literature could be viewed as a strategy for survival, for communication of information. So it would be a philosophy of literature. And plenty of philosophies of literature have been written. Aristotle wrote one. Postmodernists have written them. There are Marxist philosophies of literature, existentialist ones, all sorts of feminist ones. You know, why not a Darwinian one? So that would be one avenue to pursue. I hope to do that in the near future. I hope to do that. I chose the easier one in this one, and it's to apply Darwinian thematics, things that Darwin wrote about, topics that came up in Darwinian thought. How do they relate to topics in Maupassant's fiction? So if Maupassant writes a short story about an old man who is persecuted by his peasant society that he lives in because he's falsely accused of having stolen something. Okay? How might Darwin interpret? How might Darwinian thought interpret that? What advantage does society have in persecuting a helpless old man? Something, and how does that relate to things that happen in nature, for example? Well, that was one of the chapters, and that's the one short story that I abstracted from the entire corpus to study in detail. I had been thinking about a book along these lines for a while. I made my sabbatical proposal. I drafted the first words of the first chapter and went back and did the introduction, but the first words I drafted in the third week of August that year, August 2002, and I finished the last word in the second week of December that year. So it was pretty intensive and applied 4 months or so there that I used to draft the book. That's not an exaggeration. I mean, people look at me and say, "Is that true?" You tell me it is absolutely true. I'm kind of proud of that because it was a project that I wanted to see through and finish during the sabbatical, and it worked out to happen that way. What I did was I was able to shut my door. I did all my work in my office here at the campus because my computer is here as a desktop, so I couldn't move it. I worked in my office, but I was able to shut the door, shut the world outside. My great salvation, I think, or inspiration perhaps, was iTunes. I would turn on the music, and if you're interested to hear, I'll tell you what the music was. It was two things. It was George Frederick Handel, who was just my idol. I just adore the music of Handel. So I have Handel operas and Handel concertos, and I would play them, and just the music would be on, and I'd be writing through the day. The other one is the opposite end of the spectrum, a singer-songwriter by the name of Monty Montgomery, whom nobody's ever heard of. But I have pictures of both Monty Montgomery and Handel on my wall right in front of me in the office.